Imagine yourself waking slowly, your eyes still heavy, to the faint glow of dawn leaking through the thatched weave of your modest home's roof. The night air has not yet retreated, and a soft humidity clings to your skin like a second garment, already beginning to warm with the rising light. You are not in a bed, nor on anything particularly soft, just a woven mat stretched across the packed dirt floor, still cool to the touch. The smells of damp earth, faint wood smoke, and yesterday's cooking fires linger in the air, comforting in their familiarity. Somewhere outside, the gentle scrape of stone against stone begins, the first of many domestic sounds that signal the start of another day. A grinding stone, most likely. The matate. Someone nearby is already up, already beginning the long and necessary work of turning maize into food. You sit up slowly, back stiff, limbs heavy. The hut is quiet, perhaps a few sleeping children nearby, cold under simple cloths. There is little furniture, just a few gourds, a woven basket. Tools hanging neatly from pegs in the wall. Outside, a chicken clucks and pecks idly in the dust, and a neighbor's dog howls once, then falls silent. The forest beyond the village remains dark and murmuring, its canopy still cloaked in shadow. There is no rush, but also no choice. You rise, as you do every day, because the day itself does not wait. Time is not something you watch, it is something you feel. In the shift of light, in the position of the sun, in the way the birds begin to sing. There are no hours to track, no written schedule, only the rhythms of nature, of seasons, of rituals, and of survival. You begin your first task, preparing maize. It is the center of everything: your food, your offering, your sustenance. The kernels were soaked the night before, softened with lime to release their nutrients. Now they must be ground. You kneel beside the matate, a flat stone set low to the ground, and begin the long, slow motion of crushing the maize beneath the mono, the cylindrical stone tool worn smooth from years of use. Back and forth, back and forth. The muscles in your arms and shoulders protest quietly, but the motion is familiar. There's something almost meditative in it, the sound of grinding, the smell of wet maize, the way your breath falls into rhythm with the motion. The paste that forms will be turned into tortillas, tamales, gruel sometimes sweetened, sometimes spiced, but always the same. You do not tire of it, exactly. You simply do it. As the village begins to stir, other sounds join the morning. Feet on dirt, children's soft calls, the creak of baskets being lifted, water sloshing into clay jugs. You may greet a neighbor, or simply nod as they pass. Conversation is not necessary this early. The sun is beginning to break through the mist that clings to the treetops. Thin shafts of golden light fall across the village pots, illuminating leaves. Stones, worn footpaths, the ground is soft from a recent rain. Though it will dry quickly, you step outside. Bare feet pressing into cool soil, the day's work is just beginning. You may carry firewood, gathered from the forest edge and bundled tightly with vine. Or perhaps your task today is tending to the milba, the communal field cleared of forest for growing maize, beans, and squash. The land is hard-earned, trees felled with stone axes, brush burned away, soul turned with digging sticks. You carry a few tools, simple ones, well used, and walk the path that leads out of the village toward the field. The way is shaded by trees, the air alive with the buzz of insects, birdsong, and the occasional distant cry of a howler monkey echoing through the forest canopy like the call of something ancient and unseen. The sounds are strange to an outsider, perhaps unsettling, but to you, they are part of the background, ever present, rarely noticed. The sun climbs higher, the warmth on your shoulders growing heavier with every step. Your clothing is simple, a woven wrap around your waist, loose, breathable. There are no shoes, just calloused soles hardened by years of walking. You move carefully along the path, stepping over roots and stones, past small shrines nestled against tree trunks where others have left folded cloth, bits of food, small figures molded from clay, offerings to forest spirits, to ancestors, to gods whose names are whispered more often than spoken aloud. At the milpa, you begin your work, weeding, planting, inspecting growth. The soil is not rich, not deep. You know how quickly it exhausts itself, how soon it must be left to rest and the forest allowed to reclaim it. For now, though, it is your lifeline. Every ear of maize matters. Every seed carries hope, and every failed sprout brings quiet dread. There are no stores, no backups. The gods must bless the rains. The insects must not devour too much. And always the threat of hunger looms, not loudly, but always there, in the back of your mind, like a shadow that never quite fades. As you work, sweat beads on your forehead, rolls down your back, soaks into the waistband of your cloth. The sun is unforgiving. You pause to drink from a gourd of water, not cold, but enough. You rest briefly beneath a tree, watching the wind stir the canopy high above, listening to the rustling leaves, the occasional chirp, the drone of bees. It is not quiet, not truly, but the sounds are natural, even soothing. There is no machinery, no metal, no hum of wires or buzz of screens. Just forest, just life. Returning to the village by late morning, your arms ache and your back is sore. But there is still work to do. Perhaps a neighbor needs help patching a roof, or a ritual is being prepared, and you are asked to gather flowers, or grind pigments, or weave a strip of cloth for a ceremonial use. These tasks are communal, shared, and there is pride in their completion, not because you are paid, not because your name will be remembered, but because they're necessary, because they keep the world turning in small, unseen ways. You pass by others returning from their tasks, each bearing the signs of the same labor. There is no luxury here, no leisure. Even the elders, those too frail to work the fields, sit weaving, or caring for children, or tending small shrines. Your hands are never idle for long. The sky, always watching, slowly shifts toward its midday hue. Overhead, the sun continues its slow, heavy arc. The shadows grow shorter. The village is alive with motion, but never frantic. The pace is steady, familiar, as it has been for generations, and in that rhythm, there is a kind of peace. As the sun continues its slow passage overhead and the sky begins to shift into the softer blues of the afternoon, your limbs grow heavier, not just from the weight of labor, but from the warmth that clings persistently to your skin, soaking through the thin fabric of your wrap and pooling beneath the cloth at your waist. The scent of the village begins to change. Cook fires relit, wood crackling in stone-lined hearths, the faint sweetness of roasting maize, crushed herbs tossed onto hot stones. And occasionally, if fortune favors, the earthy smell of tamales prepared for a feast day or shared meal. You return to your home or perhaps to a shaded communal space, placing down tools that have grown warm in your hands. There is no lunch in the way you might think of it, just a brief rest. A bite of tortilla or mashed beans, taken in silence or soft conversation. You sit on a low stool, or simply on the ground, back against the wall of your home, eyes half closed, listening to the familiar murmur of life round you. Chickens cluck and scratch, children laugh or cry. Someone begins to sing softly as they weave, the voice rising and falling in a slow, circular pattern, like the rhythm of the loom itself. There is no real break in the day, no pause button to press, but in these quiet moments you find something like rest, just enough to carry you into the long hours that remain. Later, you may gather water again, walking the familiar trail to the cenote or well, carrying a gourd vessel that rubs against your back, balanced by a strap across your forehead. The path is uneven, scattered with small stones and tree roots, and the forest edges press close, rich with birdsong and the occasional low rustle of unseen creatures. You know these sounds. You know the smell of rain caught in the leaves, the way the wind moves differently before a storm, the signs that tell you when the jaguar has passed nearby, not because you saw it, but because the monkeys fell silent and the birds did not return to the trees. You know the rhythm of this place in your bones. As the day stretches toward evening, your final tasks are mending a tool, sweeping the hard-packed floor with a bundle of reeds, preparing a small offering at the household shrine. You may light a bit of incense, just a pinch, watching as the fragrant smoke curls upward and disappears into the rafters. You may place a folded cloth beside a carved figure, or whisper a prayer, not loudly, not always with words, but with intention, for protection, for rain, for continued breath, and always for balance in the nearby plaza. Preparations may be underway for a community ritual. You hear the low beating of a drum, steady, slow, like a heartbeat echoing through the air. Dancers may be adorning themselves with paint made from crushed minerals, feathers tucked into woven belts, shells around their ankles. You may join the crowd, or watch from the edge, the firelight flickering on faces both young and old, everyone caught in the slow tide of movement. Song, smoke, and sacred rhythm. Ritual is not separate from life, it flows through it like the rivers beneath the earth, unseen but essential. As darkness falls, the air cools slightly, though the weight of humidity remains. Shadows stretch long across the village, lanterns of flickering flame placed near doorways. The sound of frogs rising up from the forest like a chorus. You eat again, perhaps a simple stew, or roasted squash, or just more tortillas folded with salt. There is no abundance, but there is enough. You eat slowly, seated on the ground beside others, the firelight dancing across tired faces. Laughter may drift through the dusk, soft and brief, like smoke caught in a breeze. After the meal, there is little left to do. No lights to dim, no clocks to watch. Just the quiet, the settling of bodies into rest, the return to your mat as the forest sounds grow louder and more layered with the coming night. The jungle is not silent. It pulses with life. Crickets chirp in chorus, tree frogs trill, owls call out from high branches, and somewhere in the distance, the slow rhythmic beat of a drum still echoes, though it may only be in your mind now. You lie on your mat, feeling the warmth of the day still lingering in your skin, your muscles sore but used to it. You are tired, not with frustration, but with fullness, a day lived through with quiet endurance. There is no blanket, just a cloth pulled over your body to ward off the dampness that creeps in. You listen, you breathe. The world does not pause, but it slows. The stars above begin to appear bright, steady, ancient. You know their names. You have heard their stories. They are woven into your world, not just as light, but as signs, as messages, as reminders. Somewhere nearby, a child stirs. A dog whines once, then settles. Someone hums a lullaby, its words lost to distance. And you close your eyes, ready to rise again when the first grey light returns. This is your life, humble, demanding, ancient. It asks much of you, your body, your time, your silence, and yet It gives back in its own way a place in the rhythm of things. A thread in the great pattern that stretches across time and forest and stone. And now, as the sounds of the jungle swell and recede, and your thoughts begin to slow, let us gently leave the quiet dirt pots and flickering fires behind. Let us turn our gaze to one who walked among the palaces of carved stone. Beneath towering pyramids, draped in jade and meaning, let us travel north, through the forest and through time, to the city of Palenque, and the long reign of a king who called himself Divine Packle the Great. Imagine a boy, born not into a quiet village or among the drifting scent of maize and clay ovens, but within the heart of a once great city cradled by jungle and time. This city, known today as Palenque, was called La Comha by its people, meaning big water, for the many streams and springs that bubbled gently through its limestone valleys. It was a city of echoes, of old stone temples rising from misty green hills, their surfaces carved with symbols that spoke to the stars and the sacred rhythms of time. Into this world, in the year 603 CE, came a boy who would one day be remembered as Kayanich Janob Packle, or simply Packle the Great. But at first, he was merely a child in the shadow of uncertainty. Halank's dynastic line had fractured after years of conflict and instability. The throne had been weakened by internal unrest and external threats. And the people watched the sky and the earth for signs that the divine order might one day be restored. Into this silence came Packle, born of noble lineage through his mother, Lady Sackcock, herself a descendant of royal blood. Her influence would shape both his early years and the direction of the entire city. She was not just a mother, but a political figure of remarkable presence, and although my succession typically flow through male rulers, Lady Sackcock assumed control of Palenque as regent, preparing her young son for the role that fate, birth, and divinity had laid before him. Imagine the world that young Packle moved through, a palace compound built of smooth white stone, softened by centuries of touch, where corridors led past open courtyards filled with blooming flowers and smoky incense. The walls round him were inscribed with images of gods and ancestors, serpents coiled in the sky, and kings rising from the earth like trees. The scent of crushed herbs and pine resin might linger in the air, along with the distant rhythm of a woodman drum or the call of birds from the canopy above. This was not childhood as we might think of it. It was preparation, immersion, instruction. Packle's daily life would have been filled with ceremonial learning, the reading of glyphs, the recounting of dynastic myth, the observing of sacred rites. His every movement, even as a boy, would have been measured against the expectations of his lineage, watched by scribes, priests, and nobles. He likely wore finely woven cotton garments and jade ornaments even in youth, but these were not merely luxuries, they were symbols of his identity. Outward signs of his inner role as a future link between the human world and the divine, in Maya. Thought, kings were more than rulers, they were anchors, binding the physical and supernatural realms through ritual and order. As he grew, Packle would have learned not only the histories of his ancestors, but the movements of the planets, the cycles of maize and rain, the meanings of dreams and omens. The Maya calendar, a marvel of astronomical precision, governed all aspects of life, and Packle would have been taught to interpret its symbols as naturally as walking across stone. Thresholds. His name itself, Packle, means shield, a word evoking protection, strength, and duty. But the shield would not yet be tested. At 12 years old, in the year 615 CE, Packle was crowned king. The ceremonies marking his ascension would have been long, rich with symbolism, and conducted under the careful eyes of priests and nobles. At the edge of the city, incense would rise to the heavens, carrying prayers to Itzana, the sky god, and to the many other deities who watched the fates of men. It would not have been assumed that a child could bear the weight of rule. And yet, Crackle was more than a child. He was the living image of the cosmic order, now made manifest in human form. Though his voice was still young and his frame not yet strong, his reign had begun. Lady Kagik remained an active presence in his early years, offering guidance and stability. It is easy to imagine the two of them, mother and son, standing side by side beneath the stone lintels of a temple courtyard, conferring in hushed tones as the city stirred round them. She had held Palenque together during dark years, and now her son would continue that work not with haste, but with vision. And so, the boy king's journey began, not with conquest or ceremony alone, but with careful steps through ancient halls. Beneath phrases that whispered of time and transformation, each day was a lesson, each gesture deliberate. The burden of kingship lay not in ruling people alone, but in sustaining the cosmos itself through the rituals, calendars, and stories that gave life its structure for Crackle. The rhythm of life would never again be ordinary. Every sunrise was a sign, every rainfall a covenant. And beyond the stone walls of his palace the jungle continued its slow reclaiming, quiet vines reaching for forgotten corners, roots pushing gently against buried stairways while the rivers whispered to themselves the stories of the kings who came and went. Crackle would be no ordinary ruler, but in these early days he was simply a boy being molded by power, by tradition, and by the silent watch of eternity pressing in from all sides. As the years passed, the young king of Palenque matured beneath the shifting shadows of temple walls and the weight of divine expectation. Kianich Janob Crackle, no longer a boy but a sovereign in full, began to shape not only the city, but the very memory of kingship itself. By his mid-20s his vision for Palenque was becoming clear: to restore the city to its rightful grandeur, to affirm its connection to the gods, and to inscribe his legacy into stones, that the echoes of his name would persist long after the breath had left his body. His reign unfolded not in sudden bursts of violence or conquest, but through steady construction, diplomacy, and ritualism as deliberate as the turning of the calendar stones. Imagine the clink of stone tools on limestone as artisans carved elaborate glyphs into freshly quarried slabs. These were not simply decorations, but sacred texts meant to endure, bearing witness to the divine lineage of Crackle and the cosmic cycles that intertwined his life with those of his ancestors and gods. Across the city, Crackle initiated the construction of immense ceremonial architecture. The most iconic of these would become the Temple of the Inscriptions, a structure that rose with quiet majesty from the jungle floor, its 9 levels symbolizing the 9 levels of the Maya underworld. Zybolba, this temple would eventually house Crackle's own tomb, a resting place unlike anything discovered in the Maya world before or since. But during his life, it was a declaration that Palenque was not lost, not broken, but reborn under his guiding hand, beneath the humid skies and the watchful eyes of the priesthood. The city began to pulse with renewed purpose. Skilled laborers, architects, and engineers worked in harmony, their efforts coordinated through a complex social system rooted in tribute and seasonal cycles. Stone blocks were hauled by hand, lifted by sheer muscle and will, and carefully placed to fit with a precision that would astound modern engineers. Plaster was smoothed over facades, and brilliant paints now faded once glowed with deep reds, yellows, and blues. Life within the palace complex also changed. Crackle's court grew in size and ceremonial sophistication. The king surrounded himself with a close group of nobles, priests, and scribes, each responsible for managing aspects of governance, record-keeping, and ritual. The scribes, in particular, played a vital role recording the king's deeds not in ephemeral ink but in stone on stelae, staircases, and temple walls. These were not mere chronologies. They were acts of cosmological reinforcement. Each inscription declared Pakal's position within the great story of creation, binding his personal biography to the divine drama of time. It is worth pausing here to reflect on the concept of time as Pakal would have understood it. For the Maya, time was not linear but cyclical. Each era, each Bacton, was a great turning of a wheel, and within this wheel, kings were born to maintain balance. The ritual calendar, the Tzolk'in, and the solar calendar, the Hob, interlocked like gears, dictating auspicious days for planting, sacrifice, and war. Pakal's reign was mapped against these cycles, each major event his ascension, his victories. His constructions carefully timed to align with celestial movements. He was not merely responding to the heavens, he was aligning his entire existence with them. In 627 CE, at the age of 24, Pakal suffered a brief setback when Palenque was attacked by the rival city of Clackmul. Though the incursion was damaging, Pakal and his court weathered the storm. And in the years that followed, Palenque entered its most prosperous phase, rather than retaliating through large-scale warfare. Pakal continued to reinforce his city's strength through building and diplomacy. His approach was emblematic of a deep-rooted belief that cosmic harmony was maintained not through endless conquest, but through ritual fulfillment and sacred architecture. Central to this mission was the expansion of the Palace of Palenque, a sprawling complex of courtyards, halls, subterranean passages, and the iconic four-story Tauran architectural feature unique in Maya construction. The tower may have served ritual or observational functions, or perhaps symbolized ascent toward the heavens. Either way, it stood as a proud beacon above the canopy, a stone decoration that Palenque had found its heart again. Meanwhile, within the palace walls, Pakal's personal life evolved. He took wives, possibly more than one, though the most prominent was Lady Tsokbuajor, who became queen and bore him children. One of their sons, Keon Bolam II, would eventually succeed him, continuing the dynastic narrative that Pakal had so carefully nurtured. Yet Pakal's identity was never limited to his role as father or husband. He embodied a sacred duality, mortal man and divine vessel, caught between the world of the living and the patterns of the stars. As he aged, this identity deepened. By his 40s and 50s, a remarkable span of life in a time when many perished, young Pakal's presence became more revered. He was now not just king, but a living ancestor, a conduit to the divine past. Rituals honoring him would grow in complexity. His voice, once high and youthful, now resonated through stone corridors with measured authority. His face, likely adorned with jade ear spools and a towering headdress, would appear in countless reliefs, never alone, always in connection with mythic ancestors or celestial deities. The king had become a fixture not only of Palenque's governance, but of its sacred geography. Every temple, every courtyard, every carved panel reinforced the vision of a city reclaimed from chaos and positioned firmly within the divine order. By the time Pakal reached his 60s, a staggering age by ancient standards, his legacy was assured. The city he inherited as a fractured remnant had become a jewel of classic Maya civilization. Though rival city-states continued to rise and fall around him, Palenque stood as a testament to endurance, vision, and the careful stewardship of tradition. Still, even for kings, time does not wait. Pakal's body, though adorned and elevated, was mortal, and as his final years approached, preparations began for his passing not with fear or secrecy, but with the same ritual precision that had governed his entire life. The Temple of the Inscriptions, long under construction, neared completion. It would not be merely a burial site, but a sacred machine, its staircases, tomb chamber, and massive sarcophagus, all designed to guide Packle into the underworld and secure his deified transformation. The glyphs upon its walls told not only his life story, but his journey into the afterlife, where he would rise as a maze god and return in cycles of rebirth for Packle. Death was not an end, but a new alignment within the stars. In the final chapter of Kayanage Janob Packle's remarkable life, the weight of time settled slowly upon his shoulders like the moss creeping over the limestone temples he had built. By the year 683 CE, the great king of Palenque had ruled for nearly 7 decades. His city stood adorned with the labors of his vision temples rising from the forest-like stairways to the heavens, courtyards etched with the names of his ancestors, and walls that whispered his story in glyphs older than memory. And though his breath still stirred the humid air, preparations had long been underway for a journey that no mortal could avoid. In accordance with my belief, Packle would one day descend into the underworld, a realm known as Zybolba, to face trials not unlike those found in the sacred texts the Popolva, the storybook of the gods, the temple of the inscriptions. Begun decades earlier under his direction, was conceived not merely as a monument to his reign, but as a metaphysical guidebook, a tomb temple whose every level, chamber, and inscription played a role in escorting its occupant from this world to the next, deep beneath its pyramid base. A crypt was hidden, cleverly concealed with stone plugs and passageways designed to keep intruders at bay and protect the sacred journey within. In August of that year, after 68 years of rule, and at the age of 80, Packle passed from the world of the living. We do not know the precise moment of his death, only that the rituals surrounding it would have unfolded with immense ceremony. Priests and nobles would have gathered beneath the canopy sky, chanting the old prayers, burning copal incense thick with the scent of pine and resin. His body, likely anointed with sacred oils and wrapped in fine textiles, was adorned with symbols of divine kingship. Among these would be a jade mask, its features carefully shaped to mirror his own calm, noble, eternal. This mask, one of the finest examples ever recovered from the ancient world, was not merely decorative. It was a transformative tool, a way for Packle to shed his human limitations and take on the attributes of the maze god, whose death and rebirth symbolized the cyclical nature of time itself. As his body was lowered into the stone sarcophagus in the hidden chamber below the temple, he was accompanied by offering ceramics, jade bead shells from distant coasts, and 6 individuals thought to have been sacrificed to serve him in the afterlife. Their presence was not seen as grim, but as honorable a spiritual retinue to accompany a king through the veiled corridors of Zybolba. The massive stone lid placed atop Packle's sarcophagus was itself a cosmic map, intricately carved. It depicts Packle in a posture of rebirth, seemingly falling or rising along the axis mundi, the world tree that connects the underworld. Earth and heavens. Around him swirl symbols of the cosmos, serpents, celestial monsters, and glyphs of time. To the modern eye, it may appear mysterious, almost alien in its complexity, but to the Maya, it was deeply familiar visual prayer etched in stone for centuries after his death. Packle's name endured in Palenque. His son, Keonbolam II, took the throne and continued his father's architectural legacy, adding new structures and ensuring that the dynasty remained anchored in the city's heart. Later kings would also invoke Packle's memory in inscriptions, calling upon his divine authority to bolster their own legitimacy. He was not merely a former ruler, but a deified presence, a star in the sky, a whisper in the incense smoke curling through the temples at dusk. Yet even the mightiest cities must contend with time. In the centuries that followed Packle's reign, Palenque declined. The reasons a complex combination of ecological strain, shifting trade routes, warfare, and perhaps internal unrest. One by one, the great cities of the classic Maya world fell silent, their plazas overgrown, their temples swallowed by jungle. The scribes laid down their tools. The calendar wheels turned on without readers for over 1,000 years. Pakal's tomb lay undisturbed, hidden beneath layers of stone and earth. Its secrets intact, the temple above remained visible. Its steps weathered, but still proud. Local people remembered the place, often with reverence, sometimes with stories passed down from generation to generation. But the world moved on, and the name of Janab Pakal faded into mystery. It was not until the 20th century that the silence was broken in 1949. Mexican archaeologist Alberto Ruiz Lulia began exploring the Temple of the Inscriptions in earnest. For years, he climbed its steps, mapped its corridors, and cleared centuries of debris with painstaking care. Then, in 1952, he discovered something extraordinary, a hidden stairway sealed with stone. As it was slowly cleared, step by step, it revealed a passage leading deep beneath the temple. After months of excavation, Ruiz finally stood at the edge of a vaulted chamber that had not seen light in over a millennium. There, at its center, lay a massive stone sarcophagus, its lid carved with unfamiliar imagery. And within, the jade mask still resting on his face, was the body of Pakal. The discovery sent ripples through the world of archaeology. Until then, no royal Maya tomb of such grandeur had ever been found intact. The preservation, the complexity of the inscriptions, the sheer artistry of the burial all were astonishing. And as scholars began to translate the glyphs and study the artifacts, Pakal's story gradually re-emerged, pieced together from stone and silence. The Temple of the Inscriptions became not only a symbol of Maya ingenuity, but a testament to one king's lifelong dialogue with time, death, and the divine. His name was spoken again, not in prayer but in study. His image circulated, not in royal procession, but in books and exhibitions. Yet, even as his story became known, it retained its aura of calm mystery. Pakal had planned his passage through death with such care that even its rediscovery felt less like interruption, and more like continuation, another turn of the wheel. Today, visitors climb the steps of his temple, gaze upon the replica of his tomb, and read the translated glyphs that once whispered his lineage into the world. And though the jungle still presses in at the edges of Palenque, and the howler monkeys still call from the treetops, the presence of Pakal endures not as a ghost, but as a rhythm, a memory. A part of the living architecture of time. To understand the legacy of Janab Pakal is to understand how the Maya wove time and identity into an unbroken thread, in death as in life. Pakal did not vanish, but transitioned, his presence flowing into the city he had shaped and the stories that would ripple outward through centuries of silence. The Temple of the Inscriptions, more than mere monument, became a kind of anchor in time, a stone calendar of memory in a world where memory itself was sacred. The Maya had always measured time differently, not just as minutes and days, but as living forces that cycled and returned. Pakal was born on a specific day in the long count calendar, linked to celestial patterns, and his reign was carefully recorded to align his life with cosmic cycles. His death too was encoded in glyphs and imagery that hinted not at an end, but a transformation, his essence now folded into the rhythm of divine time, the beat of the underworld drums, and the turning of the stars overhead. And so, in the decades after his burial, while his son Bolland and successors carried forward the lineage, Pakal remained an active participant in the affairs of the city. His name was invoked in stelae and dedicatory texts. His divine status was reaffirmed in rituals, and his visage, idealized and eternal, reappeared in sculpted reliefs that adorned the very temples whose blueprints he had imagined in. Life, this intertwining of history and divinity, was not unusual for the Maya, who believed their kings were more than mortal rulers. They were intermediaries between realms. Pakal's legacy lived not only in buildings or texts, but in the continuation of a royal lineage that claimed descent from the gods themselves. And yet, just as time had elevated Pakal, it would eventually pass beyond him. Palenque, once vibrant and filled with ceremony, fell quiet as the classic period waned. The city's population declined, the priests ceased their daily rituals, the jungle returned, vine by vine, until the city was hidden again under layers of green and memory. Even so, the bones of the story remained waiting beneath centuries of earth, perfectly still. When Pakal's tomb was unearthed in the mid-20th century, the modern world found itself face to face with a civilization whose view of time, death, and rulership was at once foreign and oddly familiar. Scholars marveled at the artistry of the sarcophagus lid, the glyphs so precise and deliberate, the jade mask so serene in expression that it seemed more asleep than dead. And slowly, patiently, they began to read his story not just as a king, but as a voice from the deep past. What emerged was not simply a chronicle of wars or conquests, but a narrative of intention, a ruler who understood that his greatest achievement would not be the buildings he raised, but the messages he left encoded within them. For Pakal, the city of Palenque was not just a seat of power. It was a living scripture, a map of the cosmos, a mirror of the heavens carved in stone. Through this lens we can see the extraordinary depth of Maya thought, their architecture not merely functional symbolic, their rulers not merely administrative but cosmological anchors, their rituals not merely performances but essential mechanisms for maintaining the balance between worlds. Even the very act of inscription was a kind of sacred binding, a way to trap time in language. The scribes who etched Pakal's name, who recorded his accession and his lineage, were not just bureaucrats. They were stewards of eternity, ensuring that the breath of their king would echo across generations. And so it has, today, standing before the temple of the inscriptions. One can feel the gentle pull of Pakal's design. The steps rise slowly, evenly spaced, encouraging a deliberate ascent upward not only through space, but through layers of meaning. The temple's chambers, once filled with incense and song, now host the rustle of leaves and the footsteps of careful visitors. And though his body lies in stillness, the story of Pakal moves onward through scholarship, through quiet reflection, and through the humbling recognition that even in the vast silence of centuries, some voices continue to speak. It's a story not of conquest or glory, but of continuity, patience, and an unshakable belief in the sacred rhythm of time. Imagine yourself now walking back down from the temple summit, the limestone still warm from the sun, your hand brushing the stone where a king once passed. The forest hums round you, the distant call of a bird rising like a forgotten prayer. You look once more at the steps behind. You, now seeming less solid, more dreamlike. In a way, you've walked backward through time, just as Pakal intended, not to visit a dead king, but to listen, quietly, to the echoes he left behind. His story, like the long calendar that marked his birth, does not end. It cycles, it pauses, it continues. Imagine yourself deep in the lush lowland jungle of what we now call Central America. The heat is dense, softened only by the occasional rustle of wind through the canopy and the slow, rhythmic chirping of insects hiding among ancient trees. Vines hang low, tangled across the forest floor, and somewhere nearby, water drips with patient constancy. You race standing at the edge of a dark opening in the limestone cool air, gently exhaling from within. Before you is a cave, but not just any cave. To the ancient Maya, this was a sacred threshold. a liminal space between the world of the living and the realm beneath. Known as Zybolba, the Maya underworld wasn't merely a place of punishment or sorrow, it was where the gods resided, where the ancestors lived on, and where the cycle of death and renewal was endlessly turning. The caves were not feared in the modern sense. They were respected, revered, and approached with both awe and purpose. When you step forward, the humid warmth of the jungle fades, replaced by the damp breath of stone. The floor beneath your feet is uneven, worn by centuries of quiet passage. Shadows move gently as a torch, perhaps made of pine resin, flickers in your hand. The light casts golden ripples across the jagged formations, and you notice the walls round you are not bare. They hold stories, fragments of pottery carefully placed, not discarded lying clusters. These were offerings in the Maya tradition. To offer an item to the gods was to animate it, to give it spirit, and then to release that spirit through ceremonial breaking. The shards you see are not remnants of waste, but echoes of faith. Many of these caves contain layers upon layers of such offerings, each piece a silent prayer to the divine. The farther you walk, the quieter the world becomes. The jungle's noise fades entirely, replaced by the slow echo of your breath and the soft drip of mineral-rich water forming. Stalactites overhead. The Maya viewed these formations not only as beautiful, but as sacred. Some believed they were the very limbs of the earth, the roots of the world tree connecting the heavens, the terrestrial world, and the underworld. Rituals were often performed beside these stone columns, transforming the cave interior into something akin to a living temple. The deeper one ventured, the more serious the purpose. It was here, far from the light of day, that the most sacred ceremonies unfolded. Priests and shamans, trained in the esoteric knowledge of cosmology, would lead processions into the depths. They chanted, burned incense, poured offerings into natural wells known as cenote sand sometimes. They brought with them far more costly gifts. In several caves, archaeologists have discovered human remains, often those of children, placed with great care and reverence. This is a sensitive topic, and we must approach it with quiet understanding. These acts were not born of cruelty or bloodlust, but of a belief system in which life, death, and cosmic order were intertwined. To the Maya, sacrifice was not simply loss, it was transformation. The body returned to the earth so that the earth, in turn, might give rain, crops, and continued life. These sacrifices were likely rare, reserved for times of great drought or distress, when the balance between human society and the divine forces they worshipped was perceived to be in danger. And still, among all the sorrow and solemnity, there was beauty. In the famous cave of Acton Tunachil Maknal, deep within Belize's jungle, lies the calcified skeleton of a young girl, known today as the Crystal Maiden. Her bones, untouched for centuries, have fused with the cave's minerals, shimmering gently in the low light. Round her, the offerings of long-ago ceremonies remain, their positions undisturbed, their meanings still whispered through their silent presence. It is hard to overstate the importance of caves in Maya spirituality. They were not peripheral, they were central. In fact, many great Maya cities were constructed near atop cave systems. In some temples, stairways and altars align directly with cave entrances, as if to guide the devout into the heart of the earth. To this day, many modern Maya communities still regard these places with reverence. Prayers are still spoken. Candles are still lit. The past, though distant, remains gently alive. Imagine now that you sit upon a smooth stone near the heart of such a cavern. The light is dim, the air cool. Perhaps you hear the quiet footfalls of others pilgrims, centuries ago approaching with offerings of maize, obsidian, and cacao. You might see the faint outline of a carved glyph on the wall, a depiction of the rain god Chok, whose axe split clouds and released rain. You might hear the chanting of a priest calling upon him, asking for mercy. And you might feel, in that moment, not fear but continuity, a connection between the living and the dead, between earth and sky. These caves were more than shrines, they were living. Breathing participants in my ritual life, they received offerings, they answered prayers, they held the memory of ancestors and the weight of time. Some were vast and echoing, others narrow and almost claustrophobic. Yet all were marked by the same sacred quiet, the same hushed respect that we still feel when we imagine them in our modern lives. Caves might be curious natural features, places to explore briefly and then leave behind. But for the ancient Maya, they were the places where the gods dwelled just beneath the surface, watching, listening, and occasionally answering. As your mind drifts gently, you might find comfort in this ancient rhythm, in the simple truth that people once journeyed into the darkness not out of fear but out of hope. That within the earth's stillness they found not emptiness but meaning. You may imagine a procession slowly moving out from the cave now, their torches lowered, their chants faded, their offerings made. Above them, the jungle breathes. Rain begins to fall softly at first, then in a steady rhythm, and somewhere, deep in the stone heart of the world, the gods of the Maya, ancient and eternal, are listening still. Beneath the forest floor, hidden for centuries beneath layers of stone, soil, and silence, lie the bones of the Maya. They are not simply remnants of the past, but quiet storytellers whispering, in their stillness, of the lives once lived, the burdens once borne, and the beliefs that carried those lives forward into memory. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a long-forgotten burial site, the air thick with the scent of earth and time. Sunlight filtered through the green canopy above. Before you, archaeologists have gently uncovered the remains of individuals laid to rest hundreds, sometimes thousands, of years ago. But this is no single cemetery. The Maya bury their dead in diverse and symbolic ways under their homes, in temple plazas, in caves, and in elaborate tombs. Each burial site tells a different story, shaped by the person's role in life, the time they lived in, and the values of their community. As you look down upon the skeletons delicately unearthed, each rib and vertebrae gently brushed free of soil, you begin to notice patterns. In some cases, bodies are laid in fetal positions, curled as if sleeping, a pose that symbolized rebirth or a return to the womb of the earth. In others, they lie flat on their backs, arms folded peacefully across the chest, accompanied by jade beads or finely painted pottery. These items were not left randomly. They were offerings, provisions for the journey beyond. A bowl of food, a polished stone, a necklace placed with care. To the Maya, the afterlife was not a distant, abstract place. It was tangible, part of a grand cosmic cycle, and death was merely one passage within it. Some of the skeletons bear signs of rank or distinction, teeth inlaid with jade or hematite decorations that would have sparkled in the sun indicate individuals of high status. Skulls intentionally shaped during infancy, flattened at the forehead or elongated at the back, reveal a cultural practice designed to reflect beauty, identity, or nobility. But not all bones tell tales of privilege. Many show evidence of hardship. Teeth worn down to their roots speak of a diet dominated by maize, ground on stone metates that left behind fine grit, slowly eroding enamel over a lifetime. Spinal compression and joint damage tell of heavy labor carrying loads, grinding corn, building temples. Others show the ghostly traces of malnutrition in their long bones, in stunted growth, or in porous skulls, suggesting iron deficiency and childhood illness. Yet even here, in the marks of difficulty, There is a quiet dignity, a reminder that every life, whether noble or common, left its impression in time. And then there are the more mysterious cases. Some bodies are arranged with their heads turned sharply, or with limbs carefully positioned in patterns that suggest ritual rather than rest. A few skulls are missing altogether, removed after death, perhaps to be placed elsewhere or used in ceremonies in certain cases. The remains appear to have been revisited long after burial bones moved, rearranged, even painted. These were not acts of desecration, but of reverence. To the Maya, the dead were not gone. Ancestors remained present, active, and deserving of continued attention. In the city of Copan, in what is now Honduras, excavations beneath a simple house revealed a sequence of burials beneath the floor, each generation adding its own dead in layers, as if anchoring the living to the lineage of the past. Imagine the quiet of those rooms, the slow sweep of time across generations, and the unbroken chain of memory held close beneath the home. The stories told by these skeletons grow richer when paired with the objects they were buried. With a simple obsidian blade placed by the hip, might suggest a hunter or craftsman. A small carved figurine clutched in the hands of a child may hint at a toy, or a companion for the journey into the next world. Sometimes, even the grave itself speaks its placement, its construction, the care or haste with which it was made. In the case of royal burials, like that of the famous Red Queen of Palenque, grandeur takes center stage. Her tomb was lined with rich cinnabar pigment, giving her bones a vivid crimson hue. She was laid to rest with intricate jade jewelry and surrounded by other individuals, perhaps attendants, perhaps relatives. Yet even here, in the grandeur, there is silence. No inscription names her with certainty. We call her queen, but we do not know her voice. Her bones remain, quiet but powerful, bridging the gap between mystery and memory. And in other places, the lines blur between burial and sacrifice. At sites like Chichen Itza, remains found at the bottom of sacred cenotes, natural sinkholes considered entrances to the underworld, suggest a different kind of offering. Some were young, others old, many bearing no marks of violence. Were they chosen for their purity, for their status, or simply offered in desperation? We may never know. But even these bones, far from being tokens of brutality, were laid into the hands of the gods with ceremony, with songs and smoke, in the hope that rain would fall, that crops would grow, that life would continue. As you reflect on these many forms of burial, you might find yourself imagining the rituals that surrounded them. The low chant of mourners, the soft sound of hands scattering cornmeal over a grave, the slow procession of relatives carrying the body through narrow jungle paths. For the Maya, death was not an end, but a movement to return to the earth, a transformation, and perhaps a step into the stars, even in our modern world, with its sharp edges and bright lights. There is something quietly timeless about the way people have always honored their dead. In the flickering candles of modern Maya ceremonies, in the bundles of flowers laid at rural graves, you can still see the echoes of this ancient reverence. The past is not gone. It is simply resting. And so the bones remain, whispering softly to those who care to listen. In every rib, a breath once taken. In every tooth, a meal once chewed. In every joint, a task once performed beneath the heat of the sun. These are the remnants not just of death, but of life ordinary, extraordinary, filled with hope and struggle and meaning. And as you imagine these silent figures resting beneath the earth, covered once more by time and root and stone, you might feel a stillness settle in your own thoughts. The rhythm of life and death, once so active in the Maya world, continues on in gentler forms through memory, through history, and through the soft telling of their story. Long after their voices fell silent, High above the canopy of ceiba trees, where the dense jungle opens up to reveal a sky painted in deep twilight blues, the ancient Maya once looked to the heavens not with mere wonder, but with purpose, with structure, with reverence. Imagine yourself in a clearing just outside a Maya temple, its steep steps now softened by time, its stone facade bathed in the glow of early moonlight. The sounds of the forest begin to hutch, birds yielding to insects, the rustle of leaves becoming rhythm rather than noise. You tilt your head skyward, just as the Maya did countless generations ago, and the stars emerge, pinpricks of eternity scattered across the dark. But to the Maya, these were not random lights. They were markers, signals, living components of an ever-turning cosmic order. The Maya observed the movements of the stars, planets, sun, and moon with astonishing precision, charting cycles with such care that their calculations rival those of modern astronomers. This wasn't idle curiosity. The sky was a vast and sacred calendar, one that governed planting and harvest, festivals and sacrifices, war and peace. In the darkness before dawn, Venus would rise, brilliant and bold, and its appearance might signal a time of warfare or ceremony, the path of the sun across the sky. The way it rose slightly north or south depending on the time of year informed the structure of their entire agricultural cycle. Even the shadow that crawled down the stairs of the temple of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza during the equinox, creating the illusion of a serpent descending from the heavens, was no accident. It was a carefully designed marvel of alignment, a stone-bathed symphony between earth and sky. Time, for the Maya, flowed in many directions at once. They did not rely on a single calendar, but several overlapping systems that each told a different kind of time. The most widely known today is the Tzolk'in 260-day ritual calendar composed of 20 named days and 13 numbers. It was not based on the solar year, but on something more intimate, perhaps the human gestation period, or a sacred rhythm known only to the gods. Then there was the Hob, a 365-day calendar that more closely followed the solar cycle, broken into 18 months of 20 days, with an odd little month of 5 days at the end. These final 5 days were called Web, a time considered dangerous, liminal, when the boundaries between the human and divine blood and ordinary rules seemed suspended. People might stay close to home, avoid new ventures, and engage in ritual cleansing, all to guard against the invisible forces that might roam more freely. But perhaps the most awe-inspiring of all Maya time-keeping systems was the long count. This calendar tracked time on a scale of millennia, counting days from a mythological creation date in 3114 BCE. Through the long count, they could anchor historical events with extraordinary specificity, something few other ancient civilizations achieved with such accuracy. Inscriptions carved into stone stelae and temple walls record not just the deeds of kings, but the exact dates on which they occurred, all tied into the cosmic order. These were not arbitrary markings of time, but sacred acts of placing human lives into a larger celestial context. A ruler's accession, a temple's dedication, even a battle, was aligned with favorable astrological signs to ensure divine harmony. The stars were not only guides but participants in history. Picture the astronomer priest, seated at the top of a watchtower platform, marking the rising of Jupiter or Mars with an obsidian-pointed stick. He consults bark paper codices painted with glyphs, numbers, and celestial cycles, and relays the moment to the Ajor, the ruler, who awaits the proper sign to begin a festival or launch a building project. The nights in the Maya world were not empty, but full of meaning, full of pattern, full of the breathing presence of gods. One such god was Atzan, often associated with the sky, writing, and divination. Another was the maize god, whose death and resurrection mirrored the seasonal cycles, his journey through the underworld, reflected in the nightly path of the stars. Celestial events had both practical and spiritual dimensions. An eclipse, for instance, was never just a natural occurrence. It was a moment of tension between gods. A potential disruption in the order of things. People might beat drums or shout to frighten away the force consuming the sun or moon. Hoping to restore balance, even the layout of cities echoed celestial patterns. At Uxmal, Copan, and Tychel, temple groups are aligned not just with one another, but with solstices and equinoxes, with the zenith passage of the sun, or with the movements of specific stars. To walk through a Maya city was to move through a living calendar, a place where every step carried you deeper into sacred time. The architecture was not merely functional, but ceremonial, designed to draw the eyes upward and outward toward the sky. And in that sky, constellations took on different meanings than in the Western world. The Maya did not see Orion or the Big Dipper, but animals and gods, the dark spaces of the Milky Way. In particular, were of special importance. One dark rift, near the center of the galaxy, was seen as the mouth of the underworld, a place of transformation and rebirth. It was through this portal that souls traveled, and it was along this path that the Maize god journeyed during his trials and return. In this way, the stars were more than a backdrop, they were a map of the soul's journey, a reflection of life itself. When the famous 2012 date from the Maya calendar entered popular imagination, it was often misunderstood as a prophecy of doom. But for the Maya, this date completing a great back-turn cycle of over 5,000 years was not an ending, but a renewal. Just as the sun sets only to rise again, time continues. A new cycle begins. In the quiet night, with the stars now wheeling above you in their eternal rhythm, you might begin to feel the same reverence that shaped the lives of those who once watched these skies. Time does not march forward in a line. It circles, it turns, it breathes. The Maya lived within these circles, finding meaning not just in the future or the past, but in the intricate weave that connects them. Each star, each number, each day carefully placed in a cosmic puzzle that, though partially lost to time, still glows faintly in the heavens. And as you close your eyes listening to the imagined rustle of parchment, the crackle of a hearth beneath the stars, and the whispered calculations of a long-dead priest, you may find yourself lulled by the very rhythm they once measured the slow, steady turning of the sky. At the highest levels of the ancient Maya world, far above the muddy fields and smoky kitchens of common villages, lived a select few whose lives were wrapped in layers of ritual, prestige, and constant expectation. Imagine yourself not as a peasant now, but as a member of the noble class, perhaps even close to the Ajotha Maya king or ruler whose authority was seen as divinely sanctioned. Your world is one of ornate stone palaces and cool courtyards, of painted walls and elaborate headdresses, of formal banquets and ceremonial obligations. But though your surroundings are grand and your clothes woven from finer threads, your life is far from leisurely. In fact, the higher your status, the more bound you are to the relentless rhythms of ritual, hierarchy, and political maneuvering. From your first breath, your path is set before you. Noble children are raised not for play, but for function. You learn to speak with formality, to move with grace, to remember long genealogies and recite ritual phrases. You are trained in diplomacy, religion, and warfare, not because you might someday participate, but because you must. You are a living symbol of your family's lineage, and your every action reflects on them. In the flickering firelight of the palace school, you might be hunched over a codex, learning glyphs by candle glow symbols that carry not just language but power. You memorize the deeds of your ancestors, the alliances formed by marriage and blood, the cycles of the gods and their earthly reflections. Your teachers are scribes and priests, some of the most learned minds in the city, Yet they too are bound by tradition. Learning is sacred, and to pass on knowledge is to serve the gods. Nobles do not dress like commoners. You might wear a fine cotton tunic dyed with rare pigments, your arms adorned with jade beads, your ears and nose pierced with carved ornaments. These are not simple decorations, but signs of status, carefully curated to signal your place in the order of things. Your headdress, elaborate and towering, might feature cute little feathers that shimmer with iridescence, a bird whose tail was more valuable than gold. But such beauty is not always comfortable. The weight of your regalia is literal as well as symbolic. To stand before the people during a ceremony means hours of preparation, layers of cloth and adornment, the heat pressing in as you maintain the calm stillness expected of your rank. You must not fidget, you must not falter. Every gesture, every glance is watched. The Ajor himself, the central figure in my rulership, lives under the heaviest burden of all. He is no simple monarch, no distant administrator. He is the embodiment of divine authority, the mediator between the gods and the people. His blood is sacred, his actions mythic in scale. Imagine him seated on a carved stone throne, beneath a lintel etched with images of warfare and gods. Round him, nobles and scribes wait in hushed stillness. His face is calm, almost mask-like. Painted with red or black pigment, the rituals he must perform are endless offerings, speeches, bloodletting ceremonies where he draws his own blood to nourish the gods and affirm his legitimacy. It is an exhausting rule, one with no privacy, no pause. To be Ajor is to live a life of constant visibility and pressure. The ruler's lineage must be clear. His ties to powerful ancestors demonstrated through public inscriptions and sacred art. His authority is always being renewed through ritual and spectacle. Failure to perform his role properly could invite disaster, famine, disease, rebellion. If the crops fail, if enemies draw close, it is not only the gods who question him, but the people. Rulership is not inherited lightly. It must be constantly earned. Royal courts are complex ecosystems, teeming with advisors, wives, priests, scribes, and diplomats. While the Ajor stands at the center, he does not rule alone. His court is a place of strategy and subtle competition. Marriages are arranged not for love, but for alliance. Daughters may be sent to distant cities to cement ties, their names recorded in stelae as the mothers of future kings. Sons must prove their worth through training, ceremony, and military success. Even within the palace walls, power is fragile. A misstep, a failed alliance, a poor omen, any of these could shift the balance. Court life is as much about survival as village life, though the dangers wear different faces. Intrigue and betrayal are as real here as in any battlefield. And yet, for all its tension, court life can also be filled with beauty. The palaces are often richly decorated, the walls painted with scenes of gods and ancestors, the ceilings lined with beams of carved wood. Banquets are held during festivals, where tamales, cacao, and fermented drinks are served in intricately decorated vessels. Musicians play flutes and drums. Dancers move in slow, stylized patterns. These moments of celebration are more than mere entertainment. They are part of the ruler's sacred duty to maintain cosmic balance. To feast is to honor the gods. To host a ceremony is to reaffirm the order of the world. And amid it all, you might glimpse the ruler in his full regalia, his face unreadable beneath a jade mask, his movements slow and deliberate. He is not simply a man, but a symbol, a conduit through which the divine speaks. The elite do not build their homes or harvest their fields, but they are not idle. Their labor is of a different kind, endless preparation, constant vigilance, the weight of representation. Their lives are not private. Even moments of rest are interrupted by duty. A noble woman may rise at dawn to prepare for a ritual offering. A nobleman might travel to a neighboring city to deliver gifts, negotiate terms, or witness a ceremony. These journeys are not taken lightly, rode through the jungle are long and slow, and every step is laden with symbolic meaning. Yet, even here, in the realm of the elite, mortality is inescapable. Death comes for nobles as it does for all. The difference lies in how it is remembered. Elite burials are elaborate, with tombs filled with jade, shell, and ceramics. The body might be placed beneath a temple, wrapped in fine cloth, surrounded by offerings. Inscriptions record the deeds of the dead, ensuring their names endure through time. And while the peasants are remembered in the cycles of planting and harvest, the elite are remembered in stone and story. Yet even these stories are filtered through ritual and politics, shaped to serve the living, for in the Maya world, memory is power, and the ruler, even in death, must continue to rule. Among the stone courtyards and temple platforms of the Maya city, often cloaked in incense and shadow, moved a quiet yet immensely powerful group, the priestly class. To live among them was not to bask in wealth, necessarily, but to be immersed in the rhythms of the divine. To dwell perpetually at the edge of this world and the next. Imagine yourself now as a Maya priest or one of their closely associated aides, perhaps a youthful acolyte rising before dawn, your bare feet pressing against cool stone, the air heavy with the scent of copal, your eyes still bleary from sleep, yet your mind already full of numbers, symbols, and sacred names. You are not free to wander, nor to question, for your life belongs to the gods, and your every action is shaped by calendars more ancient than memory. The priests of the Maya were not cloistered monks, but central figures in every aspect of public life, interpreters of omens, keepers of time, orchestrators of rituals, and advisors to kings. They moved between realms, understood as both human and divine conduits. Their authority was not enforced by soldiers, but rooted in knowledge so complex, so arcane, that only the most disciplined minds could grasp it from childhood. Those chosen for priestly training were steeped in astronomy, mathematics, language, and ritual. You might spend hours tracing glyphs onto bark paper codices, memorizing complex sequences of days that could stretch into centuries. The long count calendar, the Tzolk'in, the Hob, each system ticked forward with its own logic, weaving together cycles of gods, planets, and fate, and it was your task to understand them. To read the sky like a sacred book, you might be called upon to observe the morning star Venus has. It rose in the twilight, signaling a time of war or peace. Or you might study the sun's passage through the sky, noting when it stood directly overhead, when its light struck the heart of a temple's inner chamber. These moments were not mere curiosities. They were messages from the gods. Every eclipse, every conjunction, was a whisper from another realm. The people believed, and rightly so, that only you could interpret these whispers. Being a priest meant your life was governed not by hours or seasons, but by ritual cycles so vast and intricate they seemed to fold in on themselves. Every ceremony had its precise moment, its correct offerings, chants, colors, and gestures. There was no improvisation, no deviation. To get it wrong was to invite disorder, to risk cosmic imbalance. And so, you moved carefully, deliberately, your fingers stained with red pigment, your voice trained to utter sacred syllables in a rhythm unchanged for generations. Your garb might be simple or elaborate depending on your role. Some priests wore dark robes, adorned with bone and shell. Others had dresses shaped like serpents or birds. Many carried staffs, pouches of herbs, or obsidian blades used not in warfare, but in sacrifice often of their own blood, drawn from tongue or lobe, offered in silence. For the Maya believed that pain, freely given, was a currency that reached the gods. To serve as a priest was to live in proximity to pain, though not in the way one might think. You were not immune to suffering, nor detached from human concern, but you had learned to think of pain as part of the order of things, a necessary act to keep the cosmos turning. And when others wept or feared the sky's darkness, it was you who stood firm, who lit the flame, who reminded them that the pattern would hold. Your days were full, though rarely in the way of laborers or merchants. You moved through sacred spaces, maintained altars, tended fires, and consulted omens. You taught scribes and nobles, oversaw the copying of codices, and preserved chants that could stretch for hours. At festivals, you led processions, masked and painted. Your steps measured to match the rhythm of the drums, and while others saw splendor, you felt only the weight of precision, the knowledge that every step must be exact. For the gods did not reward enthusiasm. They required correctness. To err ritual was to insult the cosmos, and that insult could ripple through harvests, through weather, through the health of kings and kingdoms, though you stood close to rulers. Your life was often one of solitude and abstention. Priests might fast for days before ceremonies, avoiding certain foods or pleasures. Some retreated for periods of isolation, seeking dreams or visions, emerging hollow-eyed but spiritually attuned. Others spent nights watching the stars, drawing careful diagrams of their movement, inscribing them in thick books whose pages crackled with age. The work was constant, and sleep was never guaranteed. Even dreams were not always your own, for visions might be sent, and you must be prepared to receive them. Despite your importance, your power did not always shield you from hardship. Political shifts could endanger even the most revered priests. A new king might favor different advisors. A poor harvest could spark unrest, and suspicion often fell on those who had failed to predict it. The same stars that once brought you honor might turn cold and silent, their meaning elusive, and so, even in prestige, you walked a narrow path, always balancing between awe and accountability. But for those who thrived in this world, there was deep satisfaction to speak the names of gods few understood, to unlock the patterns of time, to feel the rhythm of the universe echo in your chest. These were not small things. You were part of something vast, something eternal, and though your name might not be carved in stone like a ruler's, your knowledge lived on, passed from voice to voice, ink to ink. In death, a priest might be buried with scrolls or carved bones, laid to rest in a temple or beneath a modest altar. Offerings of cacao, maize, and incense would accompany you, and perhaps a jade bead placed in your mouth to serve as your heart, your soul. You were a breath for you. The cycle did not end. It turned again. And those you trained would carry on the work, marking days, watching skies, keeping the world whole through careful, silent labor. For the Maya priest, sleep was never truly sleep. It was simply another form of listening. Now let us drift even further upward through the layers of Maya society to those whose names were inscribed in stone, whose portraits were carved into stelae, and whose bloodlines traced an unbroken thread back to the gods themselves, the nobility, to be. Born into this class was to inherit not only wealth and honor, but also an unyielding web of expectations, rituals, and obligations. Imagine yourself now not as a commoner or a priest, but as a noble child waking beneath a carved wooden lintel. The room dimly lit by the soft glow of morning light filtering through a lattice of stone outside. You can hear the low voices of attendants preparing the day's ceremonial items. Your bedding is woven from fine cotton, and the scent of roasted cacao beans drifts faintly through the air, But there is little time to indulge from a young age. You are taught not only the customs of refinement, but also the burdens that come with bearing a name that echoes through the halls of power. Your body is shaped as much as your mind. Your head may have been bound in infancy to create the sloped forehead seen as beautiful and godlike. Your ears are pierced with polished jade. Your teeth perhaps filed to points and inlaid with obsidian or turquoise. These are not simply fashion statements. They mark you as distinct, elevated, closer to the divine. Your days are meticulously structured. Tutors, often learned scribes or priests, instruct you in courtly speech, glyphic writing, religious lore, and the cycles of calendars. You memorize lineages going back generations, learn the names of cities and gods, and practice public oration, because one day you will be called upon to stand before an assembly and speak not as yourself, but as the embodiment of your ancestors. You eat different food than commoners, not just more, but of higher refinement. Delicate maize tamales, seasoned with chili and cacao, stews rich with turkey or venison, fruits brought from far-off provinces. Meals are part of diplomacy, and how you conduct yourself at the table matters. You must sit upright, speak sparingly, show gratitude but not subservience. The rituals of nobility are quiet but ever present. Each gesture, each garment, each ornament signals your status, and each mistake might be remembered long after the feast has ended. You walk through palaces decorated with stucco friezes and murals, through gardens carefully maintained by a retinue of attendants. But luxury is not ease. You are a living symbol, and your life is not your own. Your family's alliances may bind you to marriages that strengthen political ties or seal trade agreements. You may be expected to govern a distant town, lead troops into battle, or make offerings at a temple, acts that are both privileges and heavy responsibilities. The noble class is diverse, of course. And not all lords are kings. Some serve as governors or provincial administrators. Some as military leaders, some scholars or court poets. But all share a role in maintaining the delicate lattice of status and obligation that defines the Maya world. A misstep in etiquette, a failure in ritual, a breach in protocol, and it could lead to disgrace, or worse, to removal from favor. The court is full of rivalries, whispers, and negotiations. Your success may hinge not only on your birthright, but on your ability to navigate the subtle dance of influence, to smile without revealing your thoughts, to praise without deception, to wait patiently for the right moment to act. It is a quiet tension, but one that never sleeps at court gatherings and festivals. Your presence is both a duty and a performance. You wear headdresses of quetzal feathers and cloaks woven from the finest cotton, your face painted with symbols denoting your lineage or role. You must appear serene, composed, dignified regardless of the internal storms you may carry, for the people look to you as a mirror of the world's order. In your strength, they find security. In your fall, they see disorder creeping in. Your family's house, its name, its history is more important than your own desires. Even in death, your role is predetermined. Great nobles are buried beneath their homes or in ornate tombs, their lives commemorated in stelae carved with glyphs describing their deeds. Sacrifices may be made in your honor, not as an end, but as a passage. Your grave is not a resting place, but a doorway through which your spirit enters the world of ancestors and gods, and from which it continues to shape the fate of your descendants. There's admiration here, of course, but also pressure, so much pressure that even wealth cannot ease it. You are constantly being watched, judged, remembered. Your portrait might be painted on a vessel, your name invoked in a court centuries after your death. Nobility offers prestige, yes, but little privacy. You must always be aware of the weight of the jade you wear. The scrutiny behind every compliment, the expectations that come with every nod from a king. You may grow used to it, or you may come to dread it, but you cannot set it down. And so, even in comfort, there is restlessness. Even in splendor, a kind of solitude. And yet, for many, this life of ritual, of reverence, of inherited power was not a prison, but a calling. They believed in the rightness of hierarchy, the sanctity of lineage, and the need to maintain cosmic order through proper rule. The nobles saw themselves not as rulers over others, but as mediators between people and gods, between chaos and balance. To them, their rule was essential. Without their rituals, their governance, their sacrifices, the world itself might tilt into disorder, and so they bore the pressure. The weight of history, the careful mask of nobility not out of vanity, but out of deep belief. In a world where every calendar round echoed with divine intent, they moved like figures in a great cosmic story, their lives bound not just by duty, but by destiny. Now, at the very summit of Maya society, we arrive at the feet of the Other Divine King whose power was at once immense and inescapably fragile. Imagine, for a moment, that you are born into the royal household of a city-state, perhaps Tikal or Palanquin. Your arrival whispered about with both reverence and calculation. You are not simply a child. You are a living symbol of divine order, the conduit between mortal and celestial realms. From your earliest days, you are groomed with an intensity few could understand. Your lullabies are prayers. Your toys are carved in the shapes of gods. The very manner in which you are held, spoken to, dressed all serve to reinforce the cosmic thread you are expected to uphold. The palace round you is more than a home. It is a labyrinth of stone corridors, of ceremonial courtyards and hidden chambers, scribes, priests, warriors. And servants flow through its halls like blood through veins. Every corner hums with purpose, and you, at the center, are both the heart of the system and a prisoner to its demands. Your education is relentless. You learn not only to read and write the elegant, intricate glyphs, but to interpret omens, to recount the vast mythologies of the Maya pantheon, to track the movement of Venus and the cycles of the long count calendar. You must know how to speak in poetry, how to deliver decrees with poise, how to remain perfectly still during ceremonies that last long into the night. Your body, too, becomes a canvas of kingship. Your skull may be shaped in infancy to mirror that of the Mies god, your nose flattened, your teeth inlaid with shining stones. Not because you wish it, but because it is required. You are being molded not for comfort or happiness, but for embodiment. Your every breath is political. Every word has consequence. When you come of age, and are crowned, it is not a moment of personal triumph. It is a ritual of transformation. You cease to be an individual and become a vessel of divine authority. The headdress you wear, crowned with jade and the feathers of the resplendent quetzal, is heavy both in weight and in meaning. The garments that drape from your shoulders shimmer with meaning older than the city itself. At your side stands the high priest, and beyond him, the war captain, the court astrologers, the sculptors and scribes, each of them waiting for your decisions. Each of them interpreting your silence. Your word is law, your touch. Sacred, but you are never truly alone. You are watched, recorded, immortalized. Every ceremony you attend is a performance. Every act you make is inscribed in stone. Every mistake you commit is whispered across rooftops. There is no respite from your rule. Even in moments of solitude, beneath the carved roof cone of your palace tower, with the jungle stretching endlessly beyond the city's edge, you are still the Ahar, still expected to maintain balance between the heavens and the earth. You preside over festivals and rites that may involve bloodletting or sacrifice, not as cruelty, but as cosmic necessity. Your own blood is the most sacred offering of all, drawn from your tongue or skin during critical rituals to nourish the gods and keep the universe in alignment. The people cheer as you pass, yet they do not see you as a man. They see in you the sun's path, the cycle of the rains, the spirit of maize. And this, more than anything, isolates you. Because while the king may wield the greatest power, he also carries the greatest burden. If the crops fail, it is your fault. If enemies breach the walls, it is a sign the gods have turned their backs on your house. If an eclipse comes unpredicted, it is a shadow over your legitimacy. And so, each night, as the chants of the priests fade and the flicker of torches softens into darkness, you lie awake not in comfort, but in calculation, who must be appeased. Which marriage must be arranged to strengthen alliances? What tribute must be extracted? What monument commissioned to ensure your name does not fade? You are surrounded by jade, but often starved for truth. Courtiers flatter. Advisors cloak their warnings in riddles. Even those closest to you, siblings, consorts. Children may see you as a ladder or a threat. Paranoia walks hand in hand with majesty. Yet even within these gilded confines, there are moments of genuine awe. As you stand atop the temple pyramid during the solstice, watching the first rays of dawn align perfectly with the carved stone serpents at your feet, you feel something greater than yourself string, a reminder that you are part of an ancient rhythm, one that flows through time with or without your presence. Your role is temporary, your stone portrait eventually moss-covered, but for now, in this moment, you are the axis of the world. You speak, and tribute caravans are dispatched. You gesture, and 100 artisans begin work on a new frieze. You nod, and a marriage alliance unites two cities. Ending decades of bloodshed, the influence you wield is immense, but always fleeting. Because Noah rules forever, death is not the end, but a passage. Your burial is an event of immense ceremony. Your tomb is filled with offerings, jade masks, obsidian blades, painted ceramics, perhaps even sacrifices. Your soul is expected to journey to the underworld, to meet the gods and take your place among the revered ancestors. Your image remains, chiseled into lintels and carved into glyphs. Your name part of the long count calendar itself. Generations from now, another ruler may cite your deeds as precedent. Your temple still the centerpiece of a city reshaped by time, and yet, for all your grandeur, you remain, at the core, a man shaped by his time, his lineage, and his beliefs. A symbol of order in a world ever teetering on the edge of disorder. A king in a kingdom where divinity and decay were never far apart. In the hush of this reflection, we are reminded that even the highest throne casts a long, lonely shadow. And as night falls gently across the canopy once more, the royal palace settles into stillness. The stars above tracing familiar patterns over a world where even kings are bound by the rhythms of time.